Hello, thank you for watching my channel today. My name is Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. Today I'm here to do my March wrap up. So I read 6 books in the month of March, none of which were from my TBR. They were all from the library, or one was an ebook. And so I've got none of them to hold up, so I'll just put the pictures up in the corner. So the first one I read was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This book is so it's on the women's long list, and it's about 2 sisters, Ayula and Kuridi. Kuridi is a nurse and Ayula is I don't think she's actually got a job. I don't think. She basically is very beautiful and she gets away. I was going to say she gets away with murder, but that's a really bad pun. She gets away with a lot because of her looks, and she basically charms people. Even though she's not very nice, she charms people by how beautiful she is, and they just all want to please her and do what she wants. And her sister is portrayed as being less attractive, but much more of an achiever in life and a nicer person. It basically follows the 2 sisters and their mum, and they're both adults. The premise of the book is that Ayula keeps having affairs with men and then ends up killing them. And she always claims self-defence, but the more times it happens, the less likely it is that it is self-defence. And it's about how her sister gets kind of roped into helping her deal with the bodies and try and cover up what's happened. So it's okay. I mean, I gave it 3 stars. It didn't set my world on fire or anything. It was set in Nigeria, so that was nice. That was a nice change of setting from a lot of books that I would read normally. I was kind of a bit ambivalent about it, really. There really wasn't that much plot. It was easy to read, but I wasn't that enamoured, so I gave it 3 stars. The second one I read was A Keeper by Graham Norton. I'd never read anything by Graham Norton before, but based on the fact that I'd heard Lauren from Lauren and the Books rave about this book so much, I decided that I'd get it from the library. So this is about a lady called Elizabeth, and her mum, she lives in New York. She's Irish. Her mum has died and she's come back to Ireland to sort through her mum's things and to sell the house. When she's looking through her mum's things, she finds at the top of the wardrobe, she finds a box of letters between her mum and a man. And Elizabeth has never known about her father, and she just knows, she's just been told that he died. And so she assumes that the letters are between her mum and her father, and she wants to know more. And so she decides she's going to try and investigate her mum's life a little bit more. And then at the same time, so the alternate chapters are from Patricia, who is the mother, from her point of view when she was young and when she was going through the time that Elizabeth is trying to investigate. So it cuts back and forth in time from mother to daughter, and there are some parallels between their lives, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I loved this book. The characters are believable and likeable, and there's quite a lot of tension in the book as well. So I wasn't expecting that element, but I can't really say any more than tension. But there's some twists and turns as you go along the way, and I couldn't wait to get back to it. I thought the setting, like the Irish setting, was gorgeous, and the characters that lived in the villages that she mentions that used to be her mum's friends, and how she describes the family members and the relationships with them. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised, because obviously I only know Graham Norton as a TV presenter, and he's very talented as a writer, and I know he's written one other fiction book which I would love to read now. I'll definitely carry on reading his work. I wouldn't be surprised if this made it. Well, I think this is going to make it onto my books of the year so far list. So if you haven't checked out A Keeper, make sure you check it out. The next one I read was part of my reading of the Welcome Prize list. So It is a the Trauma Cleaner by Sarah Krasnostein, and this is part of the Welcome Book Prize list. It started on the long list and has now made it to the short list as well. And this is the story of Sandra Pankhurst, who is a transgender trauma cleaner. She started off in a male body as a child, and she had a very abusive childhood from her father, and she was trying to figure out who she was and what her identity was, and she evolves into a trans woman. And before that happened, she's been married and she's had children, and it all gets very messy, and she has just so much trauma in her life. Like, she this isn't really spoilers because it's sort of all on the blur, but she is she has lots of careers, including being a prostitute for quite a long time. She gets involved with some really nasty characters. She's I don't know. It has so the chapters are, one chapter is her life, starting from when she's a child up to present day. Then alternate chapters are her work as a trauma cleaner. So it will tell the story of one of her clients and what the house is like, and what Sandra and her team have to do to the house, and really about the kind of the problems, like mostly mental health problems that her clients have, and how this has led them to live in such a state that they're living in. And I love those chapters. So the chapters about the cleaning were by far my favourite chapters. I loved hearing about the lives of the people whose houses she went into. I loved hearing about, like, she's so efficient with the cleaning, and she takes this place which is a huge disaster zone and she turns it into a livable space, and she's not fazed by any of the smells or the sights or the insects or anything. She just cracks on and does a good job, and I loved those bits, and I thought she was amazing. And the chapters which are her life, they're much more distressing. They're very hard to read. They are quite traumatizing. She makes decisions which are, you just think, oh, why have you made that decision? But obviously she's made those decisions coming from the trauma that she's been through herself and trying to survive. It's quite amazing that she's survived everything that she has. So it's an incredible story. I didn't give it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars. Partly, I think, because it was so traumatic to read, and because of that, I couldn't enjoy it, so to speak, because it was reading about some really horrible stuff. But I think she's a phenomenal woman, and so I think it definitely deserves a place on the welcome shortlist. The next book I read was Freshwater by Akwaeke and Emezi. So this is a book which is on the Women's Prize long list, and it was on the Welcome Prize long list, but sadly didn't get shortlisted. This is about, it's really hard to describe. So this is set in America and Nigeria, and it's about a girl called Ada who is basically possessed by spirits. So the beginning of the book explains how this happened. It says how normally when the spirit enters the body, the gate is then kind of closed behind it so that no more spirits can enter. But then for Ada, the gate is left open by mistake, and so more spirits can come and go into her body. And she doesn't really understand what's happening to her when she's very little. Then when she's at university, she experiences an act of sexual violence against her, and then her first spirit, Asagara, kind of comes to the fore of Ada, and she sort of takes over her, and she is a great character. She's kind of wicked and bold and brave, and she wants to revenge the men who want Ada, and she sort of takes control of her. And then there's this other spirit called St. Vincent, who is much more kind of quiet and calm, and sort of the voice of reason more, I guess. She talks with other spirits, like There's one who is kind of like Jesus. So it's really hard to know how to describe this. I've never read anything like this before. It was really awesome. I found it initially quite difficult because I wasn't used to this style of writing. I hadn't come across they're called Ogban, sorry about the pronunciation if it's wrong, Ogbanji, which are basically they're people with one foot on the other side, is how she describes it. And I've never read anything about them before, and it kind of is amazing how it tries to describe what's happening to her, and it tries to put it into like mental illness or a spiritual experience, or just sort of tries to reason her way out of it, and then she has to kind of accept that this is who she is. Apparently the story is sort of based on the author's life, which I find really fascinating, because if this is how their life has been, then wow, they'd be such an interesting person to talk to and to learn more about it. And I read an interview with them, and they said that the Ogbanji basically are, in the Western society, are viewed as mentally ill, and they either try and Western society basically either tries to categorize this as either a mental illness or something that is the devil and needs to be changed by Christianity or something like that. And they were trying to sort of explain how they wanted to get African culture and give it more of a voice, and explain that it doesn't fit into Western ideals. And yeah, so it was so interesting. I'm sorry if I've done a really bad job at describing it, because it's a really hard book to describe, but I definitely recommend it. It's like so original, and I'd really be excited to know what they're going to write next. Then the penultimate one is Sight by Jessie Greengrass. I wanted to read Sight for a while, and it was then on the Welcome Prize long list, didn't make the short list again. So this is about an unnamed woman, and it's not really, it reads more like a memoir, I think. It's not like a typical fiction story. We don't ever know the woman's name, and it's her musings on being a daughter and being a mother. So, and again, it flits about in time. There's no sort of linear narrative. There were sections in the middle of the book about the development of x-rays, psychoanalysis and surgery, and they are kind of just slotted in between the story. And the protagonist is basically initially trying to decide whether or not she wants to have a baby, and she's kind of really unsure about whether she wants to get pregnant or not. A lot of toing and froing, deciding, and then it cuts into when she was a child and talks about her relationship with her mother, and also her relationship with her grandmother, because in the summer holidays she would go and stay with her grandmother, who was a psychoanalyst, and she has lots of reminiscing back to those times. And I really love those bits, because even though nothing particularly happened in them, I just love bits where it feels kind of safe and cozy, and like you're a child again, and you can kind of remember what it was like to have those cuddles and have those meals in the kitchen and have those playing in the garden, and just like those times that you can remember as a child. And it takes you back really wonderfully to those times. And it also then talks about when she has had a baby herself, and while she's pregnant, and then while she's pregnant with her second as well. And she just really captures this sort of dichotomy of feeling between, there's one bit which particularly stood out for me, where she said how when she hadn't got children, she was really free and she could do whatever she wanted, but that was a freedom that she never would have recognised, because you can't recognise that freedom until you don't have it in the same way anymore. And she kind of ponders on whether she's made the right decision almost, but then when she's away from her daughter, she just wants to be back with her again. And so she's just talks about that sort of ideas of how it feels to kind of, when I say lose your freedom, I don't mean that in a horrible way, but you can't have the same sort of spontaneousness and the same selfishness that you did before you had children. And so she captures that so well, and the sort of feelings that brings up. And I just thought this was outstanding. If I'm not trying to say this in a condescending way, but if you are not a mother, I don't know how it would feel from a father's point of view, because obviously I've never been a father, but if you were not a mother, I don't know if this book would resonate in the same way, because you wouldn't really have experienced all the things that she's talking about in terms of motherhood, so you might find it didn't resonate with you as much. For me, I just got her. I loved her style of writing. I couldn't wait to get back to it. I thought this was absolutely phenomenal. It reads like a memoir. I'd really be interested to know how much of it is sort of true to Jessie Greengrass's feelings and her life. But I'm definitely looking forward to reading what she does next. I think it was fantastic, and I'm really sad it didn't make the shortlist for the Welcome Prize. And then the final one that I read was Heart by Sandeep Jauhar. Sorry again about pronunciation. This has made the shortlist for the Welcome Prize. This one is an account of the history of cardiology. So Sandeep is a cardiologist, and he's based in America. And it intersperses his own personal narrative and his family and personal cardiac history with the history of cardiology. So I preferred the bits which were told around anecdotes, so around his family history, his history, and the history of his patients. Those, because they made it real. I learned quite a lot of stuff about the history. Like, he talks about the invention of the heart-lung machine, which enabled them to repair, for instance, holes in the heart, which made people die very young before they could be repaired. He talks about the invention of pacemakers and defibrillators, and the first open heart surgeries, and even things like angiograms where you image the coronary arteries by injecting dye into them. These things, like at the beginning of the book, it starts in about the 1600s, and they didn't even know the anatomy of the heart, because they didn't know how the blood flowed around the heart, because all of the hearts they looked at were when people had died. And somebody was apparently even burned at the stake for suggesting that the blood went from one side of the heart to the lungs and back again, which obviously we know is correct, because they found that sacrilegious to say that. There was a lot about, because people used to feel that their soul was in their heart, or their feelings were in their heart, and so they were really worried about operating on the heart in case they changed those things. So there's lots of interesting things in there. Things, I found it sometimes was a little bit like reading a textbook. So I'm obviously interested in this kind of thing because I'm a doctor, but if you're not interested in physiology and anatomy, would you find it really boring? Possibly, in those bits. It's quite dense to read in places. There's also hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of animal experiments in this book, and I obviously bloody hated that because I'm vegan and I'm against animal experimentation, and they talked so many times about all the experiments they did on dogs, and I hated that. There was no graphic detail, but it was just like so we did this to the dog and see how many days it would live, and we did this to the dog. It was all in a very kind of a matter of fact, like it was just the norm. I hated those bits, and I could never give it like 5 stars just simply because of those bits, even if I'd loved the rest. So it was interesting, and the bit it did at the end, he talked a lot about his lessons about how to live based on his family and personal history and what he'd learnt, and he'd gone from a kind of a place of living in fear to a place of acceptance, and I did really like that bit. I really liked that last section at the end, but I gave it 3 stars overall because I just found it was too dense and too slow in places. So, sorry, that's gone on for a really long time, much longer than I expected. But that was my books of March. Let me know if you'd like to read any of those books, if you have read any of them, or if I've tempted you towards wanting to read any of them. And I will speak to you soon. Hope you're having a lovely week.